Welcome back, everyone, to today's Love Breakthrough Virtual Retreat class. I'm your host, Peter April, and I'm joined today by the beautiful Veronica Grant. We have been just chatting off air and are really excited to talk to you today about a topic that maybe some of you are going to find is a little bit interesting, and that is about emotional unavailability. I mean, we've probably all dated someone who would consider to be emotionally unavailable, but most of us, and the truth is, might not be aware that we have some aspects of emotional unavailability ourselves. Welcome, Veronica. I'm excited to talk about this.
Thank you so much for having me. And I cannot wait to sink my teeth into this conversation. It's going to be so fun.
Before we really reveal some of the interesting insights, because I know when I found out about this myself, I was a little bit shocked, but in a good way, because it allowed me some aspects of things that I didn't know were blocking me in love before. But I want to talk a little bit first about, like, what do we mean by emotional unavailability? What does that actually mean?
Yeah. So emotional unavailability, emotional availability, it's really not like a thing you are or are not. It's not an on-off switch. I like to think of it as, it's more of a spectrum, right? You're either like 100% totally open, emotional and available, or you're 0%. Now, to be fair, no one's probably 0% and no one is probably 100% either. Someone or everyone pretty much resides somewhere on that spectrum. And how I define emotional availability or unavailability is it's not so much about like airing your dirty laundry or like telling all your deepest, darkest secrets or like talking to your new person about all your exes. I mean, that can be a part of emotional availability if it is part of the conversation that you're having with your new partner or the person you're on a date with or whatever. But it's really, when it comes down to it, it's a willingness to be seen, to see the other person. And also, I think curiosity actually plays a really big role in this. So what I mean by that is, and actually, I think curiosity is just an underrated value or tool to do a lot of the inner work, right? Especially when you want to make it tangible and integrated into your life. But basically, like, let's say you're, I don't know, you want to date with someone and you want to text and like see if you're going to hang out again or see how they feel or what the deal is. And maybe you're kind of starting to play games in your head, like, well, let me wait 3 hours, or, I did the last text, so I should wait till they text me first, or, whatever. Right. So if you are emotionally available in that moment, you could say, yeah, maybe someone who's emotionally available would just text or whatever. Like, you can make an argument for that. But I think what makes it really, what really makes you emotionally available in that moment is a curiosity of like, why am I wanting to play this game? Why am I not wanting to text back this person and let them know that I had a good time and I want to see them again? Because then you can really begin to answer that question. Like, why are you playing the game? Why aren't you going to tell them how you feel? Oh, it's because I'm afraid of rejection, or I'm afraid of whatever. Okay, why are you afraid of the rejection? Or what does that remind you of? Or where does that take you back to? Or what feeling or story do you create because of the potential of getting rejected? And then from there, you can, kind of navigate through those waters of whatever comes up. And then you kind of work through it and you're like, okay, so I can reach out to this person. They might not respond or they may not feel the same way, but I can deal with that, right? That's being emotionally available, just really being in tune to what your fears are, what your own hangups are, and being really true with yourself and honest with yourself. And I guess really, to be honest, like, that is being seen, right? But it might be seeing yourself, but that's really being seen of like, yeah, this is actually a little bit nerve-wracking. And then working through that rather than just trying to like, play some patriarchal dating game that no one's ever going to win at.
We seem to be so very quick to label men emotionally unavailable. And it seems to be a catchphrase for when perhaps we're more invested than what the man that we're interested or dating or in a relationship with is. What is it about this? What is it about emotional unavailability? What is it about the men that we're actually confused, concerned, bothered by when we're calling him emotionally unavailable?
Yeah. So, I mean, a couple of things. I first, for folks listening who have, dated or tried to date someone who's emotionally unavailable, I don't want you to think that like that was all in your head and that person maybe really was available or whatever. Like, I do think that men have a unique set of challenges. And not necessarily because they're DNA wired that way. Maybe they are. I don't know. I'm not an expert in that, but certainly I do know and am an expert in that boys are raised a certain way, especially as they're raised to relate to their emotions or not relate to their emotions. And then those boys become men. So it is very real that men are raised in some ways to be emotionally unavailable and specifically in the very stereotypical ways that we see. And I categorize that or define that as aloof, non-committal, and doesn't want to talk about emotions, right? That's what we think of when we think of emotionally unavailability. And that is being emotionally unavailable, but that's just like one flavor of it, or a few flavors of it. That being said, when that is your experience, when you have met someone or gone on dates or tried to be in a relationship with someone who is exhibiting some of those characteristics, it's actually a lot easier to just point the finger and be like, it's their fault. It's them. They're the reason why I'm single. They're the reason why I'm unhappy in my love life. They're the reason why this has never worked out for me. And it's just easier to blame. And this is human, right? And we do this in far more areas of our life than, just dating and relationships. Like if I knock a glass off the counter, like I'm like, Stevie, you put that glass there. That's my husband. And like, I don't know, I probably put that glass there. It's just something that humans do. And it's an emotional safeguard, right? Because like I said, when I gave you that example before, when I talked about seeing and being seen and seeing the other and being curious, there's a lot of discomfort that can come up with that. Like, wow, yeah, I actually am a little nervous to potentially be rejected by this person. Or yeah, I really am going out on a limb by telling them how I feel or what I want or setting that boundary. It is much easier just to be like, yeah, that guy's an asshole. And so I do think that while yes, it is true that I'm sure many women listening to this have experienced the frustrations of trying to date someone who is emotionally unavailable. What I also think is true is that it is very safe to be in that spot of like, they're the problem. It's their fault, without turning any of that spotlight on themselves, not to like self-blame. I'm not talking about that, but just getting curious of like, oh, well, where am I shutting down? Where am I not actually expressing my needs? I'm sure this happens to you, Peter. I can't tell you how many times I get like an email from someone in my inbox or a DM or whatever. And they're like, men don't approach me. Men don't ask me out. And I'm like, have you approached them? Do you ask them out? Like I asked my husband on our first date, you know what I mean? And like, it's fine. Like all is well. But we just expect so much of the other person. And yet, we don't do that of ourselves.
What would you say is, I know sometimes many of us have felt this feeling of being anxious and having this fear of being rejected. And especially in our early relationships as well, we might not actually be aware of the depth that's possible in terms of the connection and the emotional connection in a relationship. I'm just wondering, before we actually dive into the real meat of this topic, I'm just curious as to how we would actually know when we talked about this emotional depth and the emotional availability and are we emotionally available, how would we actually be able to know or benchmark or tell if our connection or our relationship with someone was actually fully emotionally available, or was it somewhere, how is there some way in which we could sense if for anyone who's in a relationship at the moment or seeing someone, would they be able to tell if this is an emotionally connected partnership?
Yeah, I think there's a few things you can do. So I think the first thing is, and this is the most obvious, if the relationship feels like a drug, like you got to get your fix, or too good to be true, or just anything that's just like, got to have it, need that confirmation, need that affirmation. I haven't heard from him in 5 hours. I need to hear from him now. Like any of that kind of anxious kind of energy. I'm not saying that there couldn't be an emotion, like there couldn't be potential for it to be an emotionally available relationship. I mean, because it could just be your own anxieties coming up for sure. But those would definitely be some signs where I'd want to look into like, okay, is this relationship viable? Or is it really just playing into some of your core wounds and just filling a void? Because if it's filling a void, And a void meaning like, let's say, you just have, you have like low self-worth, low confidence, but then when you're with someone, you feel like you're on top of the freaking world. Okay. So that's someone filling your void. And that's what I mean by that. So when a relationship is filling your void, it is almost impossible for it to be emotionally available, because the things that will be required of you to make it an emotionally available and also a viable relationship are just not possible when someone's nestling up into that void. So I'll just give you one quick example. One part of having an emotionally viable and available relationship is boundaries. Boundaries are super important for any healthy relationship. But if someone's nestled up in that void and they alone have the power to make you feel good or make you feel happy or good enough or worthy or whatever it is, you're probably not going to be setting any boundaries with them. Or you might say like a boundary, but then you won't enforce it. So really, it's not really there, right? And so when there's not boundaries, no matter what, you're not actually expressing your needs, how you feel about something. And that alone makes it not an emotionally open, available, viable, or whatever you want to call it, relationship. So I think that's the first thing, is to look for any kind of signs where it might be, filling the void. And honestly, there's like a million examples from this. I won't go into all of them, but like if a relationship feels draining, like you have to give, like that's not going to be, again, I mean, that's kind of the same thing, because they're just filling your void of needing to give in order to feel good enough. But again, there's no boundaries. You're not asking for what you need, or you're not giving yourself what you need, or not able to give yourself what you need, because this relationship is just taking so much out of you. And then I don't want to, take away the power of our intuition and our inner knowing that we feel in our body. Because sometimes people, especially people who are, really good at manipulating, can be really good at manipulating. But what I find can happen still is when you've done the work and you're more emotionally open and available with yourself, then when something doesn't feel quite right, you may not be able to put words behind it. You may not be able to rationalize it or put your finger on exactly why you feel how you feel, but you might just be like, I don't know, something's not feeling right. And that's what you go on. You don't need to sit there and rationalize it in your head. I think as women, I do think we are raised and trained to think that if we know, you better have a good reason for it. But that's bullshit. You don't have to. You could just be like, this is a no for me, and just leave it at that.
Thing that I'm really, really excited to share with the girls that probably aren't aware is talking about the areas where we might be emotionally unavailable and not even realizing it. So it might be actually preventing us from forming a connection with someone that then develops into a lasting partnership. I know I work with a lot of women with anxious attachment, and I'm sure you probably do as well. And so we're very used to presuming that we're the ones that are very emotional and very invested. And then it's the men that we're attracted to that are usually, it's like the runner chaser dynamic that we might have heard of from the twin flames. And so we tend to assume that we're very, very available. We're showing up and we're bold and open-hearted. And sometimes that's not always the case.
Yeah. Okay. So the very first thing I want to say is wanting a relationship is not the same thing as being emotionally available for it. I spent my entire life wanting a relationship. I wanted to be married since I was 11 years old. And I'm not even exaggerating, like desperately wanted to be married since I was 11 years old. But emotionally available for it, that didn't come until much later. So that's the first thing I want to say. And also, again, like if someone is nestling up into that void and really bumping up against a core wound of yours or an old pattern of yours, you are going to feel emotion, right? Because it's going to be a very tender area for you, right? It's going to be bumping up against that worthiness wound or that belonging wound or that feeling safe wound or whatever your specific wound is. And so you're going to feel good from that, right? Because it's like, if you got an itch on your leg and you scratch it, it feels good. It's the same kind of thing. But that's not actually the same as being emotionally available. So it will take some time at first to practice, like, what is that difference between actually being open and available for the relationship versus just a relationship feeling really good, and I'm feeling these feelings and I'm confusing those feelings with actually being emotionally open. Okay, so let me give you some examples of common things. So I've already mentioned a few. If you're not saying no to something, or if you're not asking for something that you need, you are emotionally shutting down, right? Like if you're pretending to be okay with, I dated this guy who was like not into labels. And so he basically like, yeah, we can be together, but like, I'm not going to be your boyfriend. You're not going to, it was so stupid. I don't know. But like, I was obsessed with this guy because he was nestling up right into one of my core wounds. And I pretended to be okay with it. I wasn't okay with it, but I was just shutting down that part of me that wanted that security and that needed that security from having that kind of container, that commitment of being in a partnership, of being in a relationship. So if you're not asking for what you need or what you want, or you're not saying no to something, then you are shutting down a part of you that needs something. And that's not being emotionally available. Another example is, I mean, people pleasing is kind of very similar in that same vein. So if you just want to kind of make yourself palatable or parade around to make him happy or to make him stay or to make him, say or do something that will make you then feel happy or whatever it is, again, you're probably shutting down some of your needs. You're probably spending a lot of time and energy and possibly even money on this person, and that's probably taking away time, energy, or money that's yours that you could be spending on something or someone else. And again, that's shutting down your needs. That's shutting down like you as a person, what you need. Another example is, this is very common. This happens a lot once, at least what I've noticed among my clients is this happens a lot. Like once you might be a little bit pissed off, a little bit jaded about some love life mishaps. And so what this is you go on a date and you just like look for something to make them wrong or look for something to make them bad. So I'm based in the US. In the US, we have in the Constitution, when someone goes to trial, they are guilty until proven innocent. Sorry, other way around. They're innocent until proven guilty. But what happens in a lot of times in dating is, again, this especially happens, once you felt burned once or twice or more times. What happens is you go on a date or you're starting to date someone, but they're guilty until proven innocent. The thing is that, well, that's just keeping them at an arm's length. So you're not letting yourself get too emotionally close. You're not letting yourself like really be seen or see the other person because you're like, what's wrong with you? When are you going to prove me right? You know what I mean? And so, and the other problem with that is that that's like an impossible challenge you've given them because like, you can be innocent, but then you do one wrong thing. Okay, fine. You're guilty, right? And that just makes you that, but like you could be guilty, but like one right thing doesn't make you innocent, right? In that mind frame. So it's not even like something they can actually ever overcome or succeed. And so you go on a bunch of dates, and you're never going to be able to emotionally connect because they're just over there. You're over here, like looking for what's wrong with them. Another one that is common is, and this is very common in like, it happens for a few reasons, but when you aren't able to, or when you don't feel your difficult emotions like anger, sadness, grief, anything along those lines, when we're talking about emotions, you don't get to pick and choose. You don't get to be like, I like that emotion, so I'm going to feel that one, but that one kind of sucks, so I'm not going to feel that one. That's just not how emotions work. You either feel them all or you suppress them all. And so what ends up happening is when you suppress the uncomfortable emotions, again, anger, sadness, grief, like things in those kinds of categories, what you end up doing is you end up suppressing your ability to feel joy and peace and calm and yes, love. And so what you end up doing is you're going on these dates, you so desperately want to feel like loved and calm and happy and joy and all the things that we want to feel as humans. Like you want to feel that. And so you're looking to feel that from the other person, but you're putting that all on them. It's all their responsibility to bring that and to make you feel that. But the truth is that they could be the happiest, most joyful, most emotionally open, whatever person in the whole wide world. But like, if you've suppressed all of your emotions, then you're just not going to be able to feel any kind of connection. Even if they could be a really great person, or they could be a totally emotionally closed off person, but like, you're not going to be able to figure that out, or you're going to have a really hard time figuring that if you can't feel your feeling. And this happens for quite a few reasons. I think sometimes the law of attraction makes people do that because it's like high vibes or whatever, but like anger is not low vibe or whatever. But then also I think as again, especially as girls who become women, I think we are taught that anger is bad for lots of reasons. It's a whole other discussion. But what I just want people to know is that feeling the full gamut of emotions is part of the human experience. So I just spitballed a bunch of different examples. Happy to share more.
Yeah, I have two kind of questions or two bits to embellish, particularly on that last topic there. And I think one thing that I noticed is that when we've been unable to sort of manage our emotions particularly well, I mean, that's a skill. As we get older, we get better at being able to feel our emotions, but still have them managed in a way that's appropriate to the situation that we're in.
Yeah.
Right. And what I've noticed is that just how important it is for a man to be able to feel safe and to be able to trust his partner. I think when we look at the values that men are really desiring in their partner, trust is really high up there. And whilst we think that suppressing some of those unwanted emotions like sadness or anger or disappointment might be really useful to keep it all high vibe, right? What he can actually see then is there may be a situation where it's obvious that we should be feeling upset and we hide it, and then he might not realize there's something off, but it starts to create this sense of distrust because you can kind of tell we're not being authentic with our feelings. If we're not being authentic about this situation, what else aren't we being authentic about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things that came to mind. I mean, one is kind of going off what you were saying, and just another example of emotional unavailability. I think there's this expectation that he should just know. He should know that you're pissed and why you're pissed and exactly what to do about it, so you become unpissed. And I would chalk that up to being emotionally unavailable because, like you said, it's not managing your own emotions. And maybe you are pissed off because your person or your partner did something wrong and you want to talk to them about it, and that's fine. Or maybe you're pissed off about something else. Who knows? It doesn't matter. Either way, like, your partner is not a mind reader. And so there is a skill which does require emotional availability to be like, I'm actually feeling a little hurt by this, or, this thing upset me. Can we talk about it? Here's what I need from you in the future. Here's what can't happen anymore, or what I'm not available for anymore, however you want to phrase it. But yeah, I mean, that is absolutely part of being, emotionally available. Is just, and the other thing that I would say is part of, and this is very vulnerable, I find, is part of being in an emotionally available, open relationship is this idea of giving and receiving. So in a partnership, and specifically heterosexual, but I think it goes the same both ways, and also for same-sex relationships as well. And that is, a partner needs to be able to give to their partner and the partner be able to receive it, because that's actually an important way in which someone can feel love and actually feel loved as well. And so when, again, I find this really common among my clients, I'm sure it's similar in your community as well, like women being hyper independent and like, I don't need a man, or I don't need this, or I don't need that, or whatever. And the truth is that like, we are a communal species. We are designed to live in communities. We need each other. Unless you're literally like making the clothes on your back and growing your own food, like, you already need other people in your life. So, and also, it doesn't make you a bad feminist. It doesn't make you codependent or anything to want someone else in your life or to have that interdependence. And so part of being available is asking your partner for help, like their advice, or letting them support you or take care of you, especially if you're going through like a rough period, whether that rough period is like a day or a month or a year or whatever, but letting them actually take care of you. I mean, that is just so, when you think about it, like that is just so intimate to be like, I need you to take care of me right now. I'm not able to do it, or I need help with this, or I need your input, or or even if it's like, I need you to lift this heavy box for me. Like who cares? Like it can be big or small things, but that helps someone feel needed. And that's so vulnerable. It's so intimate. And it really can create the stage for a really beautiful, emotionally open and available relationship.
Veronica, I am hearing thousands of women watching this that have had the experience of sharing emotions within a relationship and feeling like it was dismissed. It triggered the other person. They were shut down. It was unacceptable to be that emotional, have felt like their emotions are too much. And so we want to be able to be emotionally expressive, but if we've had that experience that it's almost pushed a partner away, or he's then shut down and not being open to talking, like where is the fine line there? Or how would we know what is too much? What is acceptable?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things that come to mind. The first thing is that, well, let me give you just a quick example. So, one scenario that I've coached many clients through is like they're kind of dating someone, but it's not really official, and they want to have the DTR, the define the relationship talk. And so I talk to them about how they can do that and approach it and blah blah blah. I often get pushback, and they're like, "But Veronica, every time I do this, it's always the beginning of the end of the whatever the situationship was." And I'm like, okay, that's just because you started to show some emotion. You started to share your needs. You became emotionally available in this relationship. And that person was not available to meet you where you were. And that's ultimately why the relationship began to fall apart. It just like exposed what was already there. You're just either in denial about it or didn't know that it was there. It's exposed. So it's going to end. Probably better to save your time and energy sooner rather than later. And so that could be one possibility of what's happening. So if someone can relate to what you just shared, it's totally possible that that person is just simply not available for the relationship that you want and the kind of emotional intimacy that you want. And it sucks. There's no way around it to figure that out. It hurts, but also we're humans, and this is part of the human experience. There's no amount of inner work you can do to rejection proof yourself. It's about building rejection resilience. So that's the first thing. The second thing I will say is, if you've had any kind of lack of emotional availability especially the beginning of this partnership, it's possible, well, when you aren't as emotionally in tuned as I like my clients to be, then you also probably have a hard time hearing your intuition. And your intuition is where your discernment lies. Discernment is a yes or a no. There's no story, there's no drama, there's no judgment attached to it. It's just like, that's a yes or that's a no. That's it. End of story. And so if you're not emotionally in tune with that, then you might have missed some red flags or some characteristics that would hint at the fact that he might not be emotionally available. And so then you go to like really like show some emotion, and you just don't get it back, and it just feels like a huge surprise, when in fact, like if you were more in tune at the beginning, you might have been able to sense that. The final thing that I would say about that is showing emotions and sharing your needs and what's going on for you. Obviously, that's what we've been talking about. Super, super important. What is not being emotionally available in this healthy, mature way that we're talking about is dumping your emotions, is projecting your emotions, and I guess this is kind of dumping, but like when the emotions that you're showing are greater than how well or how established the relationship is. So there can be some misjudgment there. So dumping is just like, it's a little over the top. It's a little, you're just sharing a little bit more than like how open you've been in the past with the person, or how well you know each other, or how long you've known each other. Time doesn't really matter that much, but it kind of does sometimes. So that's the dumping. The projecting is, and another way to define dumping is like, you're just dumping your emotions, but you're not taking responsibility for them. Like, oh, I feel this, oh, I feel that, or I feel this. but you're not really taking any kind of responsibility of like, and here's how I'm going to figure this out, or here's what I'm going to do. I just need support from you. I just need you to remind me that I can do it or whatever, right? Like that's taking responsibility while also sharing the emotions, but just like dumping, like that's just like, okay, what do you want to do with this now? You know what I mean? Like nobody wants to have emotions dumped on them. Like, I don't care whether they're emotionally available or not, nobody wants that.
And a little bit of a personal share too, Veronica. I think there's also the strength of the emotions as well, and what we've perhaps been accustomed to. And I know that there's often this dynamic in a conversation or a disagreement or a disconnection where one person tends to go a bit big to try and get themselves heard and try and get their point across, and there's emotions behind it, which almost makes the other person shut down even more, which makes the other person go big, which makes the other person shut down even more. And so it just gets the disconnect between the shut down person and the go big person. And for those of you that are listening, you might identify one or either of those of yourself. Am I the kind of person that shuts down or goes big? But I was definitely the kind of person that goes big, that goes quite big. And I don't think that it was interestingly, it was actually watching quite a lot of reality TV and reality dating shows and things like that very early on. And I would see or read or hear commentary about the way two people interacted if they'd had a big argument or just even an argument. And to me, I would think it wasn't even really that big compared to the way that I would have perhaps responded in that situation. And so I think sometimes if we've had a tendency to be the go big person and to put a lot of, we think that's really emotional, right? That's being emotionally invested. But I think we perhaps don't really realize that the tolerance of somebody else to these big emotions and this go big experience in a disagreement or a discussion it's big. It's a lot for other people.
Yeah, totally. There's a word or a phrase for, I don't remember what it is, but I do think that there's only so much energy or there's so much like space that can be held like physically in a room. And so if someone's just like holding all the emotions or almost like dictating the emotions, it's like you're showing emotions if you're the one like controlling the emotions or the energy. But again, it's not being emotionally available. There's a difference between being emotional and being emotionally available.
There is one really obvious way in which, or more obvious way in which we're perhaps emotionally unavailable, and that's to do with the I'm going to keep my cards close to my chest with this new guy who I'm really interested in, but I'm maybe not going to show him yet because I'm going to be cool and I read the rules back in the 90s, right? Yeah. Can you talk a bit more to that? Because I still think we might kind of know that we do that, but not the extent that it's really impacting our dating prospects.
Yeah, I think that those rules there's so much stuff wrong with them. There's so much stuff wrong with them. One is if you are a woman wanting to date a man and the man you are interested in dating is emotionally available, so they're available for the relationship you want, guess what? Because they're available, they're going to be scared of rejection because everyone's scared of rejection. It's wired into their brain, right? And so if you're holding your cards close with someone who's emotionally available and they're not getting any sense from you that you might be interested or that you might say yes if they were to ask you out again, why would they go out of their way to get rejected or in their mind to get rejected? And someone who's like not really available and they're more just like kind of, I'm not saying they're consciously aware of that, but they're just really looking for like that security blanket, for a relationship. They'll just go until they find someone. They don't care because they're not emotionally invested really. And yes, they are, but in a very different way. You know what I mean? And so also all of those rules around like, look this way, don't look that way, text this, don't text that, don't let them know how you feel, don't let them know how successful or how much money you have or whatever, like all of those things. When you really think about it, all of those rules are actually asking you to take your power away. I have to give my power over to the 3-hour rule. I can't tell this person how I feel because that'll scare the person off, or I have to make myself look a certain way or appear a certain way, or I have to play down my successes, all just so I can be palatable and dainty and ladylike or whatever. All of that is disempowering. It's all patriarchal bullshit. And It's all actually, when you think about it, they are modern day rules that are pulled from fairy tales. And when you think about fairy tales, it's like, first, who wrote them? It wasn't women. I got news for you. It was not women who wrote the original fairy tales. And also, like, when we know that, like, when we watch movies like Sleeping Beauty, or even like rom-coms, like, I don't know, When Harry Met Sally, or How to Lose the Guy in 10 Days, or whatever, all these rom-coms that we love, like, it's fine to love them, whatever. But we can look at those and, like, know, like, well, that's not reality. Like, that's not how relationships, or that's not how love are, especially the fairy tales. Like, that even feels like extra obvious, right? The rules are the same. Be palatable, be someone that needs to be saved. Don't intimidate the person. That's not from Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella, And then when you think about it, it's like, one of my favorite shows is called Mad Men. I have no idea if that's over in Australia or wherever. Okay, so it's so good. Anyways, so Don Draper, who's like the ad executive guy, he has this great quote. One of the lines he says is, oh shoot, I may not get it word for word, but he says, love was invented by guys like me to sell nylons. And so we think that the guy is supposed to ask you on the date. We think the guy is supposed to text you first. We think the guy is supposed to tell you how they feel first, all of these things. But it's like, whose definition of fairy tale are you playing by? Whose playbook are you playing by? Like, some guy is just trying to sell you nylons or whatever product, or some guy who just wrote a fairy tale that's supposed to, like, just be a story, And so you have to really take a hard look at, like, where, like, this idea of, like, chivalry, like, people, like, talk about chivalry like as if it was like something that existed. It's like a mythological thing. Like, there wasn't, like, a time when, like, men were, like, chivalrous. Like, I'm sorry, it didn't happen. It wasn't pre-Tinder or pre-match. It is made up by all these fairy tales, by all these movies, by all these ads, that, whether we like to think that we're above being, like, brainwashed by this stuff, but, like, we're not. And if you're not actively de-brainwashing yourself from it, like, it's showing up. And one of the ways it might be showing up are these rules that are not only disempowering you, but they're also telling you to emotionally shut down. Like, play it cool. Don't actually like the person. Don't tell them what you want. And so you're just, like, emotionally shutting down yourself, and it's screwing you over, honestly. And that's it's a lot to say, but I really do think it is.
Wanted to share another story as well. A little while ago, I was having dinner with a single man. He was in his late 40s and he'd been on a date, and we were talking about what I do, and he was asking me questions. And I asked him, how did your date go? And I didn't hear anything about him saying it was fantastic. I got to pay for dinner, and then I got to treat her like a princess. The one thing that he described with much pleasure about this date that he'd been on was the fact that she reached across the table and put her hand on his arm as some kind of just sign of interest, just warmth, just friendliness. And just circling back to what you said before, that an emotionally available man will show up and also be sensitive about being rejected. And if he's not getting any feedback that you're interested in, I think that's such a powerful takeaway. We would censor ourselves normally and not be worried about, am I coming across as being overly interested? And it's just something I think that we can all be really mindful of, to just be more authentic, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you texting someone less than 3 hours, later, and telling them that you enjoyed your evening and you'd like to see them again, if that's too much, they were never available for the relationship you want. So it's just better to know that sooner rather than later.
Is there anything else about us perhaps having blind spots with regards to our emotional availability that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I think that, I don't know if it's so much a blind spot, but I think, going back to what I said at the very beginning, like, it's not something you are or are not, it's a spectrum. And the good news is that you don't have to be 100% emotionally available. I mean, I don't know if anyone is totally 100% emotionally, because we are human. And even if you've done all your work and all that kind of stuff, like, we're still human, and life is hard. You know what I mean? Life is hard. And so we're always going to be at least some degree closed off. And so I think that, like, if you are about 70% emotionally available, like, you're good to go. And again, that can fluctuate. Like, you can go through a time in your life whether again, it's like a few days or a few weeks or even a few months where things are just feeling a little prickly. They're a little difficult. They're a little hard. And you're like, you know what? I just need to get through this time. I know I'm not going to be available. Maybe not the best time in the world to date. Or if you are in a partnership, maybe give them a little bit of a warning to know that you're going to be in survivor mode. That's totally, totally fine. But as long as like the trend is mostly moving up and you're, at that 70% or so mark most of the time, you're going to be in a good spot. The way I like to think about it is, if you're, let's just say 0% emotionally available and you go on 100 dates, well, 100 times zero is zero. I'm not saying like 0 dates will work out. I don't know. I'm not a psychic. I don't know the future, but what I can say is that if you're 0% emotionally available and you go on 100 dates, you probably will feel like you just went on 100 dates without a lot to show for. Versus if you're like 70% emotionally available, let's say, and you go on 100 dates, 70% of those dates will, have some possibility, be with someone that has potential. And also because 70 dates will have gone well, you probably don't need to go on 100 dates. And so, when I'm talking to clients, I'm like, well, maybe take a dating break and really take some time to do this inner work. People feel like, oh, I can't do it. Like I've just got to like, I'm on a timeline. Like I wanted to be married by this age, or I didn't want to be single for this long or whatever. And so they just date, or get in relationship after relationship, but they never take the time to do this work so they can get that, emotional availability higher. But I find that if you just take the time to get the availability up there, even if that means completely not dating for 6 months, a year, a few months, whatever it is, you're probably going to waste a lot less time because you're not going to be like just doing the same old crap and eating the same old shit sandwiches, in your love life. No one has time for that.
We're all about optimizing the investment of time, energy, resources, attention, love that we put into our dating and our relationships. And I love the fact that you are going to be sharing with the girls a beautiful tool that's going to help them to understand a little bit more about where they are on that spectrum of availability.
Yes. So I have an emotional availability assessment, which I guess is below or somewhere around this video. And that's basically what it is. It's, I take you through 10 examples or 10 points to look at in terms of your emotional availability. You rank yourself, and then at the end, you'll add up your score. And then depending on your score, it's like those magazines, like in Cosmo or whatever, you look at your score. And then, I have a little explainer for next steps, if you're like from 0 to 30 or 30 to 60 or and so forth, with just, what to focus on and what to do so that you can get that emotional availability up there. I mean, if nothing else, it'll just make dating so much easier and a lot less crappy, but also it'll make it more fruitful. And that's the whole reason why you're doing it. So yeah, I definitely encourage you to take that assessment and see, be really honest with yourself and be curious, right? Because that's part of being emotionally available, is being curious and being honest with yourself, maybe even taking the test with a friend so that they can kind of check you and be like, I don't know about that. And so that you can just be more honest and get a more accurate score to see where you really are.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And I just love that if there are aspects of our dating life or our relationships that we feel do need a little bit of fine tuning, understanding our emotion availability or lack of is going to be really, really helpful. So I've absolutely loved our conversation. Thank you so much, Veronica. And if you have any final thoughts.
I think that one of my favorite things to say is like, you can do what you want, and that's actually true emotional availability. It's like, you know what? I don't really want to do this, or I want to do that, or I want to be in a partnership. I don't want to get married, or I do really want to get married. Like whatever it is, I want to have sex the first night. I want to not have sex till we're married, or something in between. Like that's true emotional availability. So do what you want. You don't need anyone's permission. You don't have to follow anyone's rules. You don't have to follow some arbitrary, dating playbook. You don't have to, do what your mom thinks, or your friends think, or your roommate thinks. Like do what you want. Do what feels good for you, what feels best for you. And I think if you're really like in that place, like you can't mess up.
Thank you so much. Okay, girls, what were your takeaways from today? I want you to make a note, write them down, and really marinate on those and allow the wisdom that Veronica's shared with us in this session today to really support you to have beautiful experiences in dating and relationships. And we'll see you again tomorrow.